Welcome to a couple of bunkies.
My wife and I are a bunch of nerds. We read silly things called books. We moved to this house a few years ago, and all of our books are in boxes up in our attic. We have this giant wall here that would be perfect for a bookshelf. Join us today while we take this wall and turn it into this beautiful bookshelf. First thing we do is we take a couple measurements and then we make a cut list. Now, in most cases, if you're buying your wood from Home Depot or Lowe's, they have a cutting station that they'll make a few cuts for you. But we have our own miter saw, and we made these folding tables. Check out the full video up here. So we start off by cutting each individual shelf. The ones we designed for our walls are 27¼ inches. All the main shelves are made with 1x10 by 12 foot whitewood. The two vertical boards are 85 inches in our case, and the horizontal one over the top is 84¼ The thing I didn't realize in this project is however they manufactured the boards, the cuts were not completely 90, which really didn't affect this project that much because I left a lot of gap for the shelves. I'd say it's good practice to go ahead and just trim off just a tiny bit of the end of the board just to get a straight line to work off of. Now we sand down each board. I don't know if it's part of the manufacturing or if it's part of the wood species, but all of these boards have almost like a waxy coating on it that it's good to go ahead and clean off. And we're going to have to go ahead and sand it down for painting anyways. We want the shelves to kind of match the kitchen since it's kind of off the kitchen. Okay, now we can go ahead and start painting. Instead of painting the individual shelves, we decided to go ahead and just paint the horizontals and then have the shelves itself have the natural wood look. So we're using some polyurethane on them. At first, I wanted to design it so that these three levels would be glued and screwed together, and all the other shelves would be adjustable for different sized books. We decided to join everything together with dowels. So I made a jig from a piece of scrap wood so I can keep all the dowels in the same position all the way through the shelf. Now, since I went ahead and drilled all the way through all of the dowel holes in the center column, I could use that as a guide for the other two columns, so all the holes could match perfectly. Now I'm going to be making a jig in order to drill the shelf holes for the end grain. To make it easier for me, I'm using a cross section from the jig I used to drill all of the holes inside of the bookshelf. This removes any complications with drill placement. And I'm going to be using a self-centering jig that I got off of Amazon. So the idea is that I can go ahead and place the self-centering jig around the wood jig that I just made and transfer those holes to the end grain. After I get done with each board, I go ahead and insert some dowels and place it where it's going to go on the shelf, just to get a visual idea of how it's going to look. Let's go ahead and speed through this. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, and ring the bell icon for notifications on future videos. Now that I make sure everything fits, I go ahead and do my glue up. We also have a merch store where we have made custom t-shirt designs for woodworking enthusiasts. And next, I make sure to square everything up and clamp it together. I do the same glue up on the other side of the shelf. We also have an eBay store where we sell a lot of our projects, including our best sellers, our walking sticks. We'll make sure to include all of the links inside of the description below. Now that the two sides are all glued together, it's really starting to take shape. Before the glue sets, I need to make sure everything is nice and square, and I can place the top board just to see how everything looks. Now, looking back on this project with all the fixed shelves, what I really should have done is carve out grooves in the column where the shelves could stay. Originally, the idea was to use a jig in order to make adjustment marks for each of the shelves and have fixed shelves halfway through the project, like I had stated earlier. But we settled for some glued dowels, and the center is going to be held together with pocket hole screws, using this small Craig jig that we have. And we repeat the same process for the rest of the shelves. Now I can take apart this bookshelf and bring it into the living room where it will stay. This bookshelf is going to be flush against the wall, so I need to remove the trim. I remove the trim with a screwdriver. Now I can move the new bookshelf into place. And now I can start adding the center shelves. I use this 90-degree picture frame clamp to hold the boards in place. Now technically we can go ahead and put books on the shelf right now, but I want to add some trim. So I'm going to resaw some walnut to thin strips in order to make some trim for this bookshelf. We need 7 pieces of trim running horizontally for each shelf. I'm going to make them 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch. I'm going to use a 3.5 inch trim across the bottom and 1.5 inch trim across the top, with a slot cut into it to overlap both the bottom and the top pieces of trim, and 4 pieces of T trim vertically. After cutting a few thin slices, I went ahead and went through the planer to remove any burn marks from the table saw. Now that the thickness is about 1/4 inch, I go ahead and cut it to about 3/4 inch. This will be used for the horizontal boards across the shelves. This longer board is going to be used for the trim across the bottom. I round over the top with the router table. I set my table saw so I can barely see the blade, and I rotate it to 45 degrees, and I set my fence to about 1 inch. This makes small V grooves into the board. And I use the fence and a bullnose bit in order to add a couple more interesting designs. And I clean it up with some sandpaper. Now I can cut the horizontal strips to size. Now I can cut some strips from the scrap walnut around the shop. Now I make the 4 horizontal T trims. It overlaps any of the shelf trim in order to make a seamless look. I use a very small round-over bit to go over all of the trim. It creates a nice, soft, and smooth look. Now I install all the trim with a brad nailer. And I go over all the brad nails with a small tack hammer. Now I attach the T-trim on top, and I cut it to length with a Japanese flush trim saw. Now I install the horizontal trim. And I attach the bottom trim. And here's the final results.